we were talking about what is called the Hevle Mashiach, or sometimes you see it as the Hevle Shel Mashiach and so forth, but it basically translates the birth pains of the Messiah. And this is a 7-year period of time. Now, I mentioned before in our first hour that there were major differences between the Christian concept of eschatology and the Jewish concept. So here we have the day of the Lord equals the millennium. So based on that, knowing that the millennium is prophesied to be a time of peace, in Christian eschatology, they have the day of the Lord, or the millennium, starting at the end of the tribulation period. In other words, that when the tribulation stops, when the tribulation is when the tribulation is concluded, that's when the millennium begins. In Jewish eschatology, it's different. Because, remember, the day of the Lord is this 1,000-year period, and the big difference is that in Jewish eschatology, the first 7 years of the day of the Lord is the birth pains of the Messiah. And so you say, well, how can that be? Because it's described as a time of peace, and if the birth pains of the Messiah and the tribulation are talking about this great time of trouble, where you have wars, you have all types of conflicts that are going on, diseases, virtually maybe as much as a half to even 2/3 of the world population is becoming is being slain, and certainly every individual in the world is experiencing the effects of this time period. How can it be a time of peace? How can it be a time of peace? Well, I grew up in a town of around 60,000 people. It's kind of a rough town. It's Port Arthur, Texas. And we only have one theater, but the theater had two sides to it. And so I want to draw a little illustration here. We have one building, but it was divided up that they showed a film on this side and a different film on that side. And they had a lobby in the middle. That's where you went to get your popcorn and your Cokes and your candy and everything. That's where the restrooms were and the water fountains. But let's suppose that one of these movies is this romantic love story. Okay, it's a romantic love story. And I mean, it's just a tearjerker type movie, but everybody comes out of there feeling so good and everything. But on this side, oh my goodness, it is a dark, violent movie where a lot of blood, there's all types of people being disfigured and diseases, and everybody comes out of there like, oh my goodness, it's a horrible. Both are taking place at the same time. So we have the kingdom of God. The kingdom of God right now is in heaven. The kingdom of God. We have, like Daniel saw the throne. Let me read the passage from Daniel in chapter 7. I'll read this one from the New King James. But in Daniel chapter 7, it says, I watched till thrones were put in place, and the Ancient of Days was seated. His garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head was like pure wool. His throne was a fiery flame, its wheels a burning fire. A fiery stream issued and came forth from before him. 1,000 thousands ministered to him. 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The court was seated, and the books were open. That is very interesting passage, because that takes place in heaven. In heaven. Very interesting, and then we're going to go to this in just a moment. You can check and you find out that in Jewish eschatology, that phrases in that passage identify it as being Rosh Hashanah. One of the festivals, Rosh Hashanah, it's also called Yom Torah, that means the day of the blowing of the trumpet. One of the festivals that we have in the fall each year. One of the names of Rosh Hashanah, and we're going to develop this much further, is called Yom Hadin, the Day of Judgment. You might want to look up the Day of Judgment in the Jewish Encyclopedia, right here, jewishencyclopedia.com. And it will tell you, in fact, we'll literally talk about this passage in Daniel chapter 7, where it says, the court was seated and the books were opened, that is the Day of Judgment, which is identified as Tishri 1 or Rosh Hashanah. But it takes place in heaven. So I want to put heaven over here. And we have in verse 13, now we read verses 9 and 10, but we're going to read verse 9. I was watching in the night visions, and behold, one like the Son of Man coming with the clouds of heaven. He came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him. Then to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom. Oh, that's where we're having the coronation, which happens to be a major aspect of the liturgy for Rosh Hashanah. They have a whole section that's called Hamelech, which means the king. And you blow the shofar for the Malchuyot, the kingdom. There's many, many times that you'll blow it for that purpose. But according to Jewish eschatology, the coronation of the Messiah will not take place on earth. It takes place in heaven. But then, at the end, it's moved to earth. It's moved to earth. Now, Messiah is often called, in Jewish eschatology, King David. King David. And because Messiah was prophesied to come from the loins of David, he will be a king according to the order of King David. Let me read to you out of the book of Yehezkel, Ezekiel, chapter 37. It says, this is a very famous passage. This is the passage about the valley, or the vision of the valley of the dry bones. And then it says, it's talking about the very end times. And it says, verse 23, they shall not defile themselves anymore with their idols, nor with their detestable things, nor with any of their transgressions, but I'll deliver them from all their dwelling places in which they have sinned, and will cleanse them. Then they shall be my people, and I will be their God. David, my servant, will be king over them. And you can check the Jewish commentaries. And that's understood to be King Messiah that it's referring to. King Messiah that it's referring to. That's his coronation. Well, the original King David, he reigned over Judah for 7 years. For 7 years. And where did he reign from? He reigned from Hebron. Or you might know it as Hebron. Hebron. That's the city where the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Abraham, Isaac, and Yaakov, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, were buried at the cave of Machpelah. You might remember that Yeshua in the Agadah, in the parable of the rich man and Lazarus, the Hebrew name of Lazarus would be Eliezer, that the Lazarus was in Abraham's bosom. Abraham's bosom is Hebron, which was used in the various Jewish writings as a synonymous term for heaven. So he reigns for 7 years from Hebron, and then the throne is moved for the balance of his reign of 33 more years to Jerusalem.